Hey guys, welcome back. So this episode, I just wanted to touch on something that I feel I've experienced myself, both in professional sport, but then also even now, just sort of in my own entrepreneurial sporting world and as a coach at the same time. I experience this quite a bit. And also I see it with a lot of athletes that I work with. Motivation. Now, I see motivation as this thing that just can come and go. It's kind of like the tide. It easily washes in and then easily washes away at the same time. If you're not aware of where your motivation is at any one time, then it's very easy to get lost in being demotivated, and then you can potentially work into a bit more of a downward spiral or feel that loss of control in what you're doing and that loss of purpose in what you're doing. So here I'm just going to run you through a few tips that I have used, others have used, and I've found that are really helpful for just being able to kickstart your motivation if you feel you've lost it, or perhaps even just upping it a little bit. If you feel you're motivated, but you kind of feel like you want to have more, then this could be tips that you could use to do that as well. So first up, I think it's worth noting that it is absolutely okay to have lost your motivation. To feel like you have to be motivated all the time isn't reality. If anything, this podcast has taught me with elite athletes and having experienced it myself, that being motivated all the time just isn't a realistic goal. You are going to have dips in motivation. So recognizing first off that having a dip in motivation is totally fine. It's whether you stay in that place of demotivation all the time and you kind of allow it to form into a downward spiral and a negative space, that is where, if you're looking to pursue a sporting goal, that you could potentially spend a lot of time dwelling in an area where you're not progressing. But you can spend some time recognizing that being demotivated is totally natural. So it's just first and foremost, don't beat yourself up. Don't beat yourself up. Even the best athletes do it. So you really want to focus on something that you can control. You want to focus on things that are potentially small steps that you can make day by day. So if you're focusing on a result, if you're focusing on where you're at right now, you may have lost motivation because you aren't getting the results. You aren't getting what you wanted right now. So take a look and see, is it a place you're in right now? Is it a place that you've become better, or are you stagnating? Have you potentially dipped? And recognizing that you're on your own journey. So your journey can be up and down. You're going to have peaks and troughs in your journey. But if you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, have you progressed from where you were previously? Simply by just taking that outward look and taking a bit more of a bird's eye view at your journey, you'll see that there is probably this upward progression. If not, then using some of the next tips could help find a way to break out of that rut. And really the one that I use most often than not is actually bringing someone else into the conversation. So if you have a coach that you're really close to, or even if it's not your coach that you're really close to, a friend, a partner, a family member, anyone, bringing someone else into the conversation and letting them know that you've lost your motivation just by simply talking about it can really help make it real and give clarity as to potentially some reasons why. They'll ask questions as to why you feel you've lost motivation, and then they could also help you forge a bit more of a plan. The other part of that is having someone to hold you accountable to what you're doing. So they'll allow you'll verbalize that goal, or verbalize that lack of motivation that you've got, and what perhaps a plan of where you can find little bits of motivation and new goals that you can reach. They will allow you to be accountable. It's almost like a verbal contract that you're writing with them right then and there. So just by bringing someone else into that conversation and opening up, and again, it kind of sits back into the first point that I made, that it's okay to have lost motivation. So don't feel like you have to be motivated all the time, and you can just turn to someone and be that little bit more vulnerable and say, I've lost motivation. These are some reasons why I feel I've lost it. And just by having that conversation, you'll be surprised at the plans and the ideas that potentially come out of it by just having someone else listen to what you're going through and seeing it from their perspective. You're in an emotional state. You're in this highly emotional bubble that you're feeling this frustration and I can't get out of it. And the answer could be very, very simple, but it's quite clouded because you're unable to see it yourself. But someone else may be able to see it a little bit better than you. So again, bring someone else into the conversation. That can really, really help. Having just spoken about goals and resetting your goals, and I just kind of brushed on it gently, this is a big part of gaining your motivation back or improving your motivation, is breaking up the big goals that you have. So taking whatever broad goal that you may have, and it could be to be the best player, it could be to be more flexible, it could be to have a great forehand in tennis, whatever it is, breaking up the goals themselves into small obtainable chunks and working at those little chunks bit by bit is a great way of gaining motivation, because you get these small wins, and being able to celebrate those wins is a huge part of it as well. So a little side note there, make sure you celebrate those small wins that you get, but create those small wins. So you take your goal, break it up into obtainable pieces. So if your goal is to, say, run a marathon, you're not going to just go and run a marathon every day. Break up the first 2K. I'm going to run just the first 2K that little bit faster. I'm going to work on my running technique. I'm going to work on my diet. I'm going to work on my sleep. All of these little goals that can work towards that big goal, just start ticking those off. And then once you've done that, that action that you're taking, that step-by-step process that you're taking will start to build that motivation towards what you're doing. So breaking up your goals, making them attainable is a huge part of it. As well as having these small little goals, change up your schedule, change up your routine. Perhaps you're losing motivation because what you're doing feels stale to you. Perhaps what you're doing is monotonous, and that's okay. Again, speak to people like coaches, friends, family. And if you're unsure of how you can change it up, then speak to people that either you know have some knowledge in the subject or the sport that you're working in, and ask them how you could potentially break up your schedule. Or even if you have that sort of inkling of something that you want to do yourself, go and do it. Even if it's away from your sport, just break the cycle a little bit. And just by having perhaps that rest and recovery and that time away, it's going to build that motivation, having that time away. I know for sure when I've had periods of rest and stepped away from my sport and stepped away from my training and whatever goal it is that I'm working towards, and just had that clarity, it has given me the space to relax from it, not think about it all the time, but also then build up hunger. It's almost like the absence makes the heart grow fonder. It really does. So just stepping away from it for a little bit, even though you feel like you need to be in it day by day, just being able to step back and have some space, have some rest, both for perhaps your body, but more often than not, your mind as well, that saves you burnout. You're able to build that motivation because you want to get back involved in it, and having that builds your motivation. And again, perhaps ideas that you weren't able to see, weren't able to think of, start running in because you've had that space, you've had that mental clarity. So yeah, step away if you feel you need to. Breaking up those goals and changing your routine can be super powerful to building back that motivation in your sport, your training, or just even your everyday life, your relationships, whatever it may be where you feel that motivation needs to be. So there you go. There's just a few tips, a few things that I have found that have helped build motivation back up. It can be a tough place if you have lost motivation. It can be a real tough space to be in because you feel like you need to be motivated all the time. You feel like you need to be doing all the time. But by simply bringing someone else in, changing your routines, holding yourself accountable, even breaking up the goals are just real easy steps that you can take in order to build that motivation back, or just build upon the motivation that you feel you have already. So give them a go, see how you get on with them. If anything, just taking that space, taking that time away can really, really help, and also allow you to have an understanding of whether it's something that you actually want. You want to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing, you actually want to do it. You want to have that purpose. You want to feel like it's something that you are interested in. And by stepping away and just having that time away, it is going to build that up for you. So thanks again for listening to another episode of the podcast. If you want to find more episodes of the podcast, you can head over to lewishatchett.com/podcast. Also find me on Instagram @lewishatchett. Also, if you're able to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, that would be amazing. We are really trying to push the podcast out to more and more people, and leaving a review is one step to doing that. So if you're able, just take 1 minute out of your time to head over to Apple Podcasts, scroll all the way down to the bottom, write yourself a review, click the stars on whatever you want to leave. And then also, we want to hear from you on how this podcast is affecting and helping you or someone you know, an athlete you know, or maybe you're the athlete yourself. But thank you so much again for listening to another episode of the podcast. Can't wait to see you again next time. I'll see you guys later.